same Olympic velodrome, he did a sponsored ride for the Australian Bible Society. And most people, you know, you sponsor, well, I'll sponsor 2 laps for a buck a lap or something. And most people thought he would, like, die after the second lap or something. That did quite well. He did 900 times around the Olympic velodrome. It's 330 Ks. A lot of people went broke. But the Bible Society did well. And the thing that makes his feat amazing, he did this in 2 days. That's 70 laps an hour. That's more than a lap a minute on an Olympic track. And those of you who've seen those velodromes, they're like a sloped wooden track. And it started raining about 32 laps into the beginning of this ride. And there's a whole painted patch on the bottom of it. And he's going down and he skidded and he came off. They had ambulances there to take him away, you know, after the second round. He could be dead or something, but he ripped his arm and he cracked a rib. And he didn't tell them about the cracked rib, because he knew they'd take him to the hospital and stuff, and then he would, you know, not be able to finish the ride, and so he'd just go back on his bike and finish the thing. Now that, you have a father like that, you inherit nothing. You understand that? And so my ambition in life growing up was never travel, because Dad traveled all the time. I hate traveling. Sorry, that's Freudian slip. And then the second thing is I never wanted to meet anybody. You know, when you have a famous father, you're actually, oh, who are you? Oh, you're Bill Pratney's son. You're never you. You're just, you know, so I didn't want to meet people. So my ambition growing up was to be a nerd and never meet anybody. And hell for me is like a room full of people and the Blackwood Brothers singing. That's it. And then heaven for me is an empty room with a computer and a book or something. You know, that I'm a nerd, all right, and I would apologize for that too. So growing up, I wanted to be a chemist, not a fire engine driver, an astronaut, or anything exciting, just a chemist. The only advantage of this is that when I went to school, people beat me up. I slipped a pill into their lunch. Messed with me, and for the next 3 days when they went to the toilet, they thought we were bleeding to death. So just pray for me that I don't backslide today. Take some of you out. I wish I had an interesting testimony to share with you about how I killed 14 people before I became a Christian. It was a mass murder around, you know, a really good warhouse in Texas or something. You know, I wish I had a great testimony to share with you, but I'm just a nerd. I made drugs. It never occurred to me to eat them. I have such a miserable thing to share with you. And my only reason I'm here today is because it's not my fault. I never asked to do this. I have no deep religious background of any sort. My parents were married in the church. I think they went a couple of times. My mother went one Easter when she had a new hat. And my early memories of church is my parents exiled me to Sunday school a couple of times because they thought it was good for us. And there was some dude who looked like some refugee out of a Monty Python movie. Like Snoopy the vulture dog. He was dressed in black, and I'm sort of trying to dress like him just to honor him. I wear white shoes just in memory of Pat Boone. And he talked like this. This is my earliest memories of the church. And he said that gentle Jesus, meek and mild, look upon this little child. I wondered if such a being was capable of having a little child. Picture I got of God in the church, and Jesus was, you know, Jesus was some dude who parted his hair in the middle and did his fingernails and skipped gaily down to Galilee. There's no great desire and hunger to be something like that. And I love what John Eldridge says in Wild at Heart. He says, if you look at the average church and try to, not what people say, but if you actually look at it, this is the impression you get, that the women are tired and the men are bored. I was not into that, you know. So a nerd, you have to understand when you're a skinny nerd too. You know, you can be a fat nerd, but when you're a skinny nerd and a small nerd, people pick on you. So if I wanted to be into something, Samson I would like. I like Samson. I like the whole idea of Samson. People think Samson was like huge. That he was like boof, you know, he had great muscles and looked like Arnie on steroids or something. I think actually Samson was skinny, like I used to be. Because when Delilah had him down on the lap and was running her fingers through his hair, it was very hard. He didn't say, Sam, you know, where did you get those pecs, man? You have cleavage. Did you work out? I mean, what? She said, what is the secret of your strength? Now, if his arms look like the rear end of elephants, would you ask that question? She said, what is the secret of his, where did that strength come from? So I think he was a skinny little dude with long hair that people whistled at and told him a joke for about 15 seconds. And then, so I like that. I like that idea. God comes on your life, does cool things, and you beat the cheese out of a whole bunch of Philistines. I like it. And David taking out giants with bummers of birthmarks right here. I like those. But, whoa. So, getting saved was a shock to me. I had no great ambitions of religious things. I never meditated on Shirley MacLaine's navel. I've never been mystic of any sort. I still have a lab in New Zealand. Chemistry labs, like I have a wall, like James Bond, and you hit it in the wall himself. Behind it is a whole chemistry lab and an electronics lab and a dark room and a studio and stuff. You know, I'm a full nerd. So getting saved was a shock. But as I said, it was not my fault. Not just minding my own business. It was, going on with my life. So I wasn't a vomiting drug addict with transaction with AIDS. I was just a normal nerd. And God came and arrested me. And this was his idea. So if I screw up, blame it on him. I wanted to be a chemist sipping lemonade. When the Lord speaks to people, he just walks up and he just calls you. He doesn't even have 3-point sermons. School of the Bible, you learn something about messages that have points. He doesn't even have like 3-point messages. He has like 2-point messages. Follow me. This is his message. Follow me. Not like, hello, what's your name? What a lovely name. Listen, have you got a few moments that we could share together? He just walks up like he owns the universe or something. He just goes, follow me. Okay? You have a choice. You can go to hell. But when he just comes and he talks to you like he's the absolute ruler of everything, this is his whole message. Follow me. Now, what does that mean in the original language? Well, follow actually means follow. And me, you'll never guess what that means. And what happened to the just as I am in 14 verses of this? And the organ playing in the background. His follow. What is his follow-up program? It's basically follow me. That's the same. So his message is 2-point. His discipleship program is 2-point. And that's what I want to talk to you about this week. 2 points. Follow, not me, but him. So, getting into this, I asked Sarah, what do you want to look at this week? She said, well, something about Jesus taking over the world. So what we do this week, we'll look at really what it is to live a Christian life. And I know you're all tired and you're looking forward to vacations and stuff. So I will do my best to throw things at you and keep you awake. Especially keep an eye on the people in the front row with the sofas. You think this water, which is somewhere around here, is actually, it's behind the thing. Well, let's bring it out where we can threaten with it. Yeah. You think this is for me to drink. It's actually not. It is to bring revival. Those in the front row who screw up by falling asleep at the inappropriate time. So I want to begin a series. We're actually going to look at what it means to be a Christian. I know this is fairly elementary, but we're going to look at God's idea of what it is to be a follower of Jesus. And what Jesus says about following him is very simple, but it is not easy. If I was writing a book on witnessing and soul winning, I'd never call it Soul Winning Made Easy, any more than I'd write a book called Martyrdom Made Fun or Crucifixion Made Easy. It really is not an easy thing. As a matter of fact, God says a brother offended is harder to win than a strong city. And it means this: if you have a broken relationship in the moral realm, it is more difficult to bring healing and bring that thing back the way it was than it is to just simply take an army and raise a city. It is more difficult. He talks about that the heavens are the work of his fingers, and that the earth is his handiwork, and these are things just with hands and fingers. But his right arm brought him salvation. So it takes more power to save a person than it does to build a world. And those of you who have had any experiences in having some form of broken friendship or broken relationship, the deeper the initial intimacy, the harder it is to bring back that thing. My favorite movie, somebody emailed me a few months ago and said, "What is your favorite movie?" You know, I sort of picked the movie of the week. My mother is an entrepreneur, and so when I was growing up, she raised tens of thousands of dollars for a movie chain. She put on a series of concerts with, famous singers and stuff, and raised all of this money for a movie chain. And as gratitude for that, this movie chain gave our family platinum passes, which are the ultimate pass you can get. You know the thing that says no passes? That did not apply. We showed our pass, they went, "We're not worthy," and we could go to any movie in that chain and just go free anytime. And so Saturday, my dad and I would just go show our passes and sit all day in the theater. We watched every movie that ever came out. And so I have a lot of dumb movies I can advise you not to see. But my favorite movie is actually Ben-Hur. And I know that sounds weird. It should be the Matrix or Purple Vomit meets the, meets Godzilla, or one of those classics like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. That should be my favorite movie. My favorite movie is actually Ben-Hur. I've seen it about 38 times in movies, and I actually saw it through the Earthquake speakers one time. The old movie Earthquake, when it was initially released, was released with a special sound system, and there is a special part on the original film track. It has a subsonic frequency in it. And it's pretty cool. I was stupid. I watched Earthquake in LA. Now that is a really dumb thing to do. So I'm sitting there in LA, in this theater, watching one of these premieres of Earthquake, and they had a voice of the theater system specially put in each theater that showed us that could play. It had a subsonic woofer in it. Now your ears sort of start checking out below 20. But you can feel a subsonic thing. And they had this, 10-cycle frequency or something in there. And then the way the movie triggers like this is a girl walks into a movie theater, in the movie. So you walk in with her and you sit down so it's scary. She sits down and you see what she sees. She's watching an old Clint Eastwood spaghetti western and stuff, and that's playing. And as you're sitting there, you're looking out of her eyes, seeing what she sees. And then they switch on the infrasonics. And you can't hear it, but you can feel it. Suddenly, this happens, and everybody goes, "Oh, shoot." And in LA, that is really, really a dumb place to watch Earthquake movies. And then the movie you're watching, which is the movie she's watching, starts going. And it starts shaking. And then it catches like this, and then starts burning and you are in the earthquake. Ben-Hur, I watched, and there were probably 10 people in that. It was like a rerun of it. And the following night, they were going to open Earthquake. And this is in New Zealand. So I had seen Earthquake in the US, and I was watching this favorite movie again, and the guy wanted to try out the Earthquake speaker. So in the crucifixion scene when there's thunder and lightning, he switched on and those poor like 10 people in the theater like that. And afterwards I waited because, you know, like he was like the projectionist and the guy who sold the popcorn and everything in this theater. And then when everybody left, I said, did you use the earthquake speakers tonight? He goes, oh, no, we're not allowed to use that. And then he said, it's great. So in Ben-Hur, my favorite movie, there's this story of two men who are very, very close friends. A Jewish prince and a ambitious young Roman. And growing up, they're friends. Messala actually saves Ben-Hur's life as a child, and then Messala has now come to a position of great authority and power. He goes to see his old friend Ben-Hur. He wants some kind of quick way to get ahead, and so he's asking his friend to tell him the names of some of the rebels so he can arrest these, and then he can take his friend with him all the way up, maybe even to Rome and all this. And his friend will not give him the names of these rebels. And so a massive fracture begins in their friendship. And that is a theme that runs right through the entire thing. There is a powerful scene where Messala is dying. He has been trampled to death by the horses. That is one scary chariot race. Matter of fact, they actually had somebody come off the real chariot race. And you see Charlton Heston has a very surprised look on his face because his chariot did actually fly up in the air and nearly came off it, and they kept it in. There's all kinds of cool stuff in there. People thumped to death, and one of those kind of, you know, cool movies. And in it, Messala's looking like a bowl of jello. He's just lying there. He's being stomped by horses, and he's, you know, and then Ben-Hur comes into the room, and he's looking down on him. Here's Messala. He's bankrupted. He's dying. It's like the ultimate revenge has happened. And Messala will not take any. He won't let anybody cut his legs off. They need to amputate his legs to save his life. He won't do it. He doesn't want Ben-Hur to see him in any way, you know, cut up and stuff. And so when his old friend comes and stands there, he looks up and he says to him, "Race 1, enemy destroyed." Ben-Hur looks down and he says, "I see no enemy." And he says, "What do you think you see? Smashed body of a wretched animal." And then he starts, and the surgeons are all there waiting to cut the legs off and things. And then he says to him, as Ben-Hur looks close, he says, "You think they're dead, don't you? Your mother and your sister, they're not dead." Then he goes, "Where are they? Where are they?" And he goes, "I'm put up in the belly of the abyss." And then he died. Now Ben-Hur walks out of there. See, he's destroyed his enemy. He's gone. But he lives on. He lives on. And his girlfriend says to him, "Moment, tremendous insight later," because that bitterness is still in his life. He finds out that the ones he thought were dead have now become living dead. Alone. And his girlfriend says to him, "It is as if you have become Messala." But the hardest thing in the world to do is to reconcile, to actually bring back healing. So, and one of the most powerful moments in the film is when he goes out to see if he can find the only one who can heal lepers. And he's dying. And he stands there by the cross as the blood comes down off the cross. And they do this wonderful graphic. They have the blood dripping down and then it goes into the water and then the rain comes and it washes along and then you see it join a river. And it just like sweeps through. And when he comes back to his girlfriend again, he says this, his voice, here's Jesus say, Father, forgive them. His voice took the sword out of my hand and out of my heart. That is what salvation does. It transforms, it has power to bring back people who are not just neutral or not just not interested, not just bored, but people who are actively haters of God. And that is why the conversion of a man like Saul is one of the most powerful instances of what the gospel actually does. So we're going to look at a whole series of things, at what is the gospel, what is salvation, a simple, basic thing, the transformation of a person. I'm not going to do this just sort of by looking at 400 verses on what the Bible says about this. I want to help go with you in these few days we have together this week into the heart of what I believe the gospel really is. We need this gospel today. We need something that will alter the world. We want not just transformations or paradigms or worldviews. That's good and that's wonderful and that will ultimately happen. But we need changes of life. We need changes not just of ideas, but changes of character, of changes of future. We have to have a way to stop what is happening in the world and reverse the damage that's done, and that is difficult. Some years ago, I was in Auckland University, which we have one of our largest engineering colleges. It's the largest department in the nation in engineering, and I was doing some lectures there called Healing the Land, a supernatural view of ecology. We're looking at divine perspective on how do you bring healing to a country's ecology. And I had a 2-hour lecture that night, and one of the professors there, who's actually the head of the Department of Engineering, came up to me afterwards, and he was very excited. He said, I'm sorry I missed the first hour, but I had to give a lecture. But he got in on the second one, and he said, I want to give you this and get your opinion on it, critique on it. He said, I've written a book about God. Now this is a guy he's not a Christian, he's a believer in God, but he has no religious background at all. I don't think he even ate fish or anything. He had no religious roots at all. I don't think he's been to church, anything. What he did is try to reverse engineer the creation. To see if there's a designer of this, what is his head like? And that's his 80-page outline on God by somebody who doesn't know God. Now that was cool because, see, when you're in the hard sciences, not, the sort of mind ones where you can create a wonderful world that you can't actually live in. But when you're in the hard sciences, you have to do stuff that's practical. If you put your finger on a 40,000 volt line and 40 amps on it, you will have a consequence. You will not be able to have sort of an existential look at things. You will like that, and you will become a potato chip. So I love listening to people who are other nerds on steroids, and I took his 80-page outline, and it was very, very good. And here's what he said, and this would shock a lot of religious people. I think it's right. He said this: there is no such thing as forgiveness. See that? Why did he say that? Because in the world of physics, there is no such thing as forgiveness. If you jump off a 40-story building without a hang glider, bungee cord, or bat suit, you shall accelerate at 32 foot a second, and yea, verily, when thou strikest thy head against the cement, thou shalt be paced. That is a statement of law. There is no forgiveness because you, oh shoot, I didn't know there was no step there. There is no mercy, you just, and you die. You know? And in the world around us, we see consequences to things. You screw up, this is what will happen. God's laws are descriptions of reality. They're not inventions. They're not made up. They are descriptions of reality from an infinite perspective. And when God gives us laws, they are not something that was just sort of invented. God didn't sit down and go, we need some rights and wrongs. Let's make... let's have like 5,000 rights, and we'll have like 5,000 wrongs. And no, there's far too many rights. People have too much fun. Let's take half of those rights, and we'll put those with the wrongs. Now, it's not an arbitrary way. It's a description of the way things actually are from an infinite perspective. We are used in our culture today to making up rights and wrongs. We vote on what we think is right. That's really a stupid thing. In my lab in New Zealand, by the way, Mark, do we have anything to write with? All these things here. I thought they were just holding up the board. I have a bottle of cyanide in my lab in New Zealand. And it is, you ask, why do you have a bottle of cyanide? Because chemists are supposed to have cyanide, all right? And besides, I may want to start a church. This has in large red letters this legend on it, poison. And then in New Zealand, they always put this in New Zealand things underneath. Not to be taken. There are a label there. So I don't take it anywhere, I just keep it right there. Now, I have a lot of chemicals in my lab that are really bad smelling chemicals. I have some that make a skunk smell great. But out of all the chemicals I have in my lab, cyanide is actually one of the nicest smelling ones that I have. And now, the approved way to smell cyanide is not this. That is not the approved way to do it. You have to even be careful unscrewing the lid. See that? Otherwise you can get a bit on, pick your nose and die. So, the approved way to smell anything you've never opened before is very cautiously unscrew that lid and then do this. You know, and if you do, cyanide smells quite nice. It smells like almond. There is a compound of cyanide in almonds. Not obviously the very dangerous one. Some of you would not be here. But it actually smells quite nice. Cyanide is so deadly, forms an instant complex with hemoglobin in your body and literally strangles your cells to death almost instantaneously. It is so fast acting. We had some rotten kids in our high school. I wasn't one of them at the time, but I was a rotten kid. They took some cyanide from the school lab and put it in bread and fed it to some of the seagulls. And these birds swept down, hit on this thing, and got about 30 feet in the air and just dropped dead right out. I mean, that's how fast it kills you. Just like that. You put concentrated sulfuric acid over it, you've got a gas chamber. So it is dangerous stuff. Now, what if I took that bottle and I pasted over the top of it, I took this off, and I put on there instead, put these off, I put on there almond jelly beans. You'd still die, but you wouldn't know why. And what we've done in our culture is we've redefined the actual, given a new description to something where you cannot actually change the reality of it. And voting is not going to help. You'll still die. When God says the soul that sins, it shall die, it is a description of reality. It's not just, I'm going to do this to you if you do this. It is a description of what actually happens when you try to violate what is true. So, when we see God's laws and when He gives us these things, think of this as from an infinite perspective. He is showing us the way things actually are. Now, we could quarrel with that. We may have, well, I don't happen to, but you're stupid. He's a lot smarter than any of us can ever dream. And from an infinite perspective, when you see this thing and the consequences to it, it is why He doesn't sin. Any more than I could intelligently eat a big fat plate of worms with a cyanide sauce. You do not violate that which you know will bring harm to you. So what God has given us is a description of reality from an infinite perspective, where if we learn the way those things actually are, I love what happened to Daniel and his 3 friends. Oh, that's a tiny little... You actually taking notes on that? That's amazing. Daniel and his 3 friends, when they purposed in their hearts not to defile themselves and reordered their lives by the laws of God, at the end of the test, and remember it was a Babylonian test, not a Jewish test, not a Christian test, at the end of their survey from the man who has built the most powerful kingdom in all of history, Nebuchadnezzar, this is the record. At the end of that test, he found them, and every man he tested them 10 times better than everybody else in the room. So when we look at these things today, and when you're looking at the Word of God and what God has given us there, remember this. If we do what God says, if we order our lives by what He says, we will have a life and a quantum leap ahead of that which is voted into existence around us. This engineer, by the way, I liked what he said about the no forgiveness thing. I thought that was great insight. But I wrote for him, I think what you say is true, but it's not profoundly and fully true. If it was fully true, if you get a virus in your computer, the only thing we can do is to throw away your system. And you and I both know that that's not necessary. What you can do is you can get in there and use Norton or McAfee or something else and disinfect it. If it has stuffed up your programs, you can reload them. If it's damaged your operating system, you can put a whole new operating system in, then put your programs. If it's actually stuffed your hard drive, I've never seen a virus do that. If it's actually stuffed your hard drive, you can physically get in, replace the drive, and do that's called healing. And the reason you can do that is because you're bigger than the system and you're outside of it. Tron. Remember Tron? It freaked out all the people in when, how did you do that? Because when the designer of the game comes into the game, it's like Matrix, only different. When the designer comes into the system, he is both in it and bigger than it, and can reorder and restructure. It's not a violation of law. It is simply higher energy. In a second law of thermodynamics, and we all know that's true because we all have to face our desks every Monday morning, that everything becomes more and more disorderly, that things run naturally down and not up. How do you bring order into disorder when this is a law? You have to put an investment in it, both of higher order, a higher structure, and then also you have to have some form of energy or power put into that system, of which you can lose some or waste some. The refrigerator makes ice because you take something more disorderly and put a structure of order on it. That's the design team that made your refrigerator. Then you have to have a power system invested in that. That's your massive electricity bill at the end of the year. And then if you put these two into that, you can bring some more order in here, getting some disorder from the heat out of the back of your refrigerator. What God does in our structure is He enters into the disorder with a higher level of wisdom and power beyond what we can do. This says you'll never naturally be able to go this way. But an investment can be made in your life of energy and power bigger than yourself. And in the study we're going to look at, this is all introduction, the message only takes 2 minutes. The study we're going to look at, I want to look really at what it is when God reorders our lives, and to look at what it isn't. So take a break for about 5 minutes, and we'll come back and pick this up. One of the most helpful things in the study of the Bible is the Bible. So if you have Bibles, I'd like you to actually look at 3 different passages in Scripture. So if you have more than 3 fingers, put 1 finger in each of these 3 areas. We're going to look at a parable starting today that I think is quite critical to understanding this whole thing. What is the gospel? What is the core elements of that which transforms a life? And we're going to look today at what we call in the Bible it's called the parable of the sower and the seed, but actually it's the parable of the soil. And this thing is mentioned in 3 of the synoptics. You know that the Gospels, the 4 Gospels that start off the New Testament, we have the Gospel of Matthew. In Matthew's Gospel, Jesus is shown to be the promised Messiah, the king, the rightful king of Israel. Matthew's Gospel is filled with prophetic stuff, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophets, saying many connections and allusions to the role of Jesus, and we see him as king, as the promised king. In the Gospel of Mark, Matthew, of course, was Jewish. In the Gospel of Mark, who is Roman, we have a whole different picture. Matthew's Gospel has a genealogy that goes all the way back, and you can see it if you just open Matthew's Gospel. You're seeing this genealogy that begins right off the start. You open up with these telephone directories. When I first became a Christian, I started reading the book of Chronicles. I thought, what in the fat did God put all this stuff in the book? It's just like endless names of people. And I could see no good reason for having that in there, except maybe play biblical Scrabble, where you go to Ahazariah and a triple square and clean the board out with 1 name. But there is this whole, there's a whole list of names here, and the only thing I could see, these are people who had weird names, which was comforting to me after a thought for a while. People have weird names. Actually, most of them didn't do anything. They just had weird names. And then they had children with weirder names than themselves. And it was just lists, like endless lists of these things. And it struck me afterwards, these are people, though they didn't seem to do anything or be famous. God thought they're important enough to put in his book. See? And that he does know our names. He knows us personally. He doesn't say, oh, you over there with the Bart Simpson hairstyle. He knows us personally. He knows who we are. And that's this whole thing. But you'll notice Matthew's got this genealogy, and it starts off, it starts with Abraham. So it begins with sort of the roots of the Jewish people, and then it goes forwards, who he begat, and he begat, and he begat, and it goes, and there's these strips of 7, and then to 14, and then a major event where there's a little bit of a description. David the king begets Solomon, and then it comes down, and you have it being carried away to Babylon in verse 11. And then comes all the way to begat, until it hits 16. And Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born. No begat. Of whom was born Jesus, who was called Christ. So you're going forwards this way. And Matthew's Gospel is prophetic. It goes this way. Mark will come back because Mark is very different. And Luke's Gospel, Luke was Greek. So have a look at his and the way it opens. You can tell Luke was a teacher because it takes him like 3 chapters to get around to what he wants to say. Luke's Gospel, and it begins like this. For as much as many have taken in hand to set forth in order of declaration those things which are most surely believed among us, and even as delivered them to us, which from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word, it seemed good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things from the very first, to write this long, roundabout, descriptive thing. Most excellent Theophilus. You know why his mother called him Theophilus? She looked at him when he was born and said, that's the Theophilus looking kid I've ever seen. And then he begins. Now, it goes on, it's this whole story, and it takes him right through until, you just keep going here, see? You keep going page, and then page, and then page, and page, until you hit Luke 3, and it starts in verse 23. So, even introducing how Jesus comes, and look, it begins with who he is. The son of, and then it goes back this way. So Luke's gospel, like a Greek, he looks back this way. And it doesn't stop at Abraham. It goes all the way back to Adam. So we have actually here two genealogies of Jesus. We have one here showing the lineage he comes from as a true and the proper one who has the right to be real king, not just of Israel, but the king of the whole world. This is Mary's genealogy. So from both sides of Jesus, there's this kingly lineage. And there's some fun little things in here. But Mark's gospel, when Luke shows us Jesus as a man, Luke is a doctor. He's a medical doctor. And he, much description in the book of Luke showing Jesus as a human being. The tears, the nights of prayer and fasting, the grief that he went through, the joy, and all this thing. Luke's gospel is filled of descriptions of Jesus as a human being. So we see him as human. And then here, Mark's gospel is quite different. It's short. It's only 16 chapters in Mark. And Mark's gospel shows Christ as a man of power and action, person of great power. In Mark's gospel, you see things happen like straightway or immediately, like boats that have been through storms. Immediately they're at the land. It's like that thing. Mark is fascinated with power and seeing the power of Christ. He looks at Jesus. He talks a lot about the crowds and the numbers of things. So what we're looking at here is somebody who's a person of great action, and we don't usually put these two words together, power and servant. But Luke's gospel shows Jesus as human, and Matthew's gospel shows him as king. Mark's gospel shows him as a servant. And in the Bible, those two things, power and authority and influence, are put together with that idea of servant. Complete flip of the way we think. You're a servant, that's the bottom rung. But in the kingdom of God, it's a bottom up, not top down. It's not a hierarchical, it grows like a plant this way. When we look at these Gospels, we call them the Synoptics, and you've probably been through this at School of the Bible and everything else. John, of course, John is like from outer space. John shows Jesus as God. That's why when they translate Scripture into other languages, one of the first things they do is they always use John's Gospel as a core thing. Because these things are written that you may know that Jesus is the Christ, and that believing you might have life in his name. All these various snapshots of Christ, Mark's gospel doesn't have. This one has a genealogy going forward, this has a genealogy going back. Mark's gospel doesn't even have a genealogy, because a servant is not known by his pedigree, but by his service. And these three gospels, because there are so many parallel passages here, we call them the Synoptics. And it is from these three we want to look at what I've called the most important parable in the Bible. I believe that this story we're going to look at will teach us more about the core of what it means to be a Christian than any other single detailed exposition in Scripture. Now, I want you then to turn to these three passages. Matthew 13, Mark 4, and Luke 8. Because each one of these tells exactly the same story. So if you've got like three fingers, we'll pop in and out between these passages. There is another way of looking at this. I've called it 3 horror stories from the Bible. And one day I'm going to actually do some graphic stuff on this. I'm building a raptor at the moment in CAD/CAM on the computer. I want a really scary looking bird. So I've crossed a raptor model with a house eagle. You may not have heard of a house eagle. It's an extinct bird. But we used to have in New Zealand, my dumb little country, one of the largest birds in the world. It was it's called a moa, M-O-A. It's much bigger than Big Bird. Very, very large bird. The house eagle is an extinct eagle in New Zealand that used to eat moa. His wingspan was about as wide as this room. And when the moas all died, the house eagle died out, but they found its bones. And it, by all accounts, is the largest extinct bird in the world. So I've tried to cross the idea of a house eagle with a raptor, and we'll have a serious bird. In Matthew 13, this whole passage that begins from verse 18 all the way down to verse 33. So it's a big chunk of stuff there. In the book of Mark 4, it's the whole first half of the chapter from verse 1 through to verse 20. And then in Luke 8, it is, again, just after a brief description from the teacher who fills in details and things, from verse 4 all the way through to verse 15. Now, I've called this the most important parable in the Bible for these reasons. Number one, there is more attention given to this parable than any other parable in the Bible. In other words, just in terms of sheer weight of attention given to it in Scripture, there is more on this parable than any other parable ever given. Not only that, there is more on this parable than all the other parables put together. And it's 3 different times we're told that same story from 3 different perspectives. Did you, when you were growing up, did your mother ever call you to do something and you were doing something else? And she called you like once? My mother, I was out in my lab, my mother would say, Winkie, come in, get something or something. And I knew that I had like 5 minutes. But if she called a second time, Winkie, then I knew I had like 1 minute. And if she called a third time, I'd better get my butt out of bed. When God says something 3 times, it's like, I'm really wanting you to pay some attention here. The third reason why I think it's the most important parable in the Bible is found here in Mark 16. I mean, in the Gospel of Mark 4, and then when following this story, when Jesus tells it, it's a very short story, it doesn't take long. And then in Mark 4, verse 13, when he's told the story and they're asking him, what does this mean? And he says, don't you understand this parable? If you don't know this one, how will you understand any of it? Which means this: A, it is a simple thing. And we usually think sometimes when a person says that was very profound, what we mean is we haven't got a clue what they're talking about. With Jesus, profound is not like that. Profound is very simple, but the more you push it, the more there's depths there that you will never plumb. So I've looked at this parable for 30 years, and I'm constantly surprised by what's there. I've looked at all kinds of different people's takes on the thing. And I'm convinced that this one story will teach us more about the nature of the Christian life, how it actually gets launched, and what are the core elements of it, than any other detailed exposition God's ever given us. Parable. When you see a parable, that is from those two basic words, para and ballo. This one from which we get the word ball, something thrown down, and para, beside something. So a parable is where you throw down something beside something in order to see something. And this story, in looking at what people say about it, a lot of times I think they focus on the sower and the seed, but I don't think that's the point of the parable. The sower stays the same and the seed stays the same in each one of these stories. The thing that is different in each story is the condition of the soil on which the parable is given. So if I ask a farmer or a gardener or something, it's three scary stories of plants that don't make it, okay? And one good story, so you can go to bed and sleep at night, of one that makes it. And if I ask any farmer or any gardener, why do these first three plants not make it? They won't go, well, it's probably had bad seed, or the sower was insane, or, they'll say something. But the real point of the story is, what kind of preparation has been given to the soil before you plant the seed? That's the core of this parable. And it's like the obvious thing. So when you look at a parable, don't really go, wow, I wonder what the deep meaning is, what it is. And then the more you dig into that, the more wonderful connections you'll see in that thing. With all of the parables of Scripture and the metaphors of Scripture, especially those ones that are picture things, you'll see the way that God communicates truth to us. He gives us a description of something, and we have this law in hermeneutics called the law of first mention. And so when you're studying the Bible, you probably already know this, but when you're studying the Bible, the first time something is mentioned in Scripture, it usually gives you a key and a clue to how it's going to be used for the whole rest of the Bible. But the images aren't just like that and nothing. They build as they go through the Bible. So you start with water. Water's like one of those profound words that has like two syllables. Water. But water, ordinary dumb water, is one of the most astonishing substances in the universe. It is totally unique. It's an amazing thing. Though we think we know. If I ask you, what is the formula for water? You're all brilliant here. We all know what the formula of water is, but we actually aren't sure. We know it's H2O, but is it H2O? Is it like H2O to the power of the linking of the molecules and stuff? There are many, many different kinds of compounds in ordinary water because of all the different variations around the thing. It is the most amazing substance I know of in the universe. It apparently breaks three rules. We know this: the colder something gets, the denser it gets. That's true for about every substance we know, except water. At a point called the triple point, it gets colder and colder and gets denser, just like that. Ice is actually lighter than water. It's because the weird molecule, it looks like Mickey Mouse, the oxygen, these two things sticking out here. Look at the weird structure of the molecule. As it gets colder, it gets denser until it reaches about 4 degrees, and then it becomes lighter. And that's why ice comes to the top. And that's why when lakes freeze, they freeze top down. Otherwise, they'd freeze bottom up. And one good winter would kill all marine life. And then you. So because of the weird structure of the water molecule, it freezes top down. And that ice forms an insulating barrier to the marine life underneath. So ordinary water, dumb, ordinary water. This is the big blue marble. And then this is the most unique planet in the universe. It's very rare to find water anywhere, but it's huge abundance. If you're going to make high order intelligence, think about that. If you're going to have any kind of intelligence, I don't care what its chemical basis. You have to have the ability to make a high-order molecule. To make high-order molecules, at least in the elements we have in our universe, you have to use either silicon or something that can form complex chains, or carbon. You could have silicon-based beings, but you would never shake hands with them because you would vaporize. But to keep high-order intelligence, you have to have large molecules to store the thing. Carbon is the only ordinary compound that forms high-order molecule in low-temperature environment. And it needs water as its base. So here we have an astonishing thing. God says, He speaks about water at the start, and it's simple, but it's scarily profound. And in the images you see in Scripture, when God uses that word water, you'll see first He creates the heavens and the earth, and the waters bring forth, and you've got life connected with water. Then later on, He destroys that world of sin with water. So you've got water separation of the waters above. You've got the metaphor of separation. You've got the metaphor of cleansing. You've got the metaphor of life. You've got the metaphor of death. So as that word water is used in the Bible, the clusters of images around it get thicker and thicker and thicker until when you reach the book of Revelation, when it speaks about the river of life flowing, there's all of these images all clustered together. So the dumbest kid in the world can read the Bible and get something straight away. But the more you read, the bigger the thing comes. It's an amazing way. It's not like who would know what that is. It is like everybody knows what that is. And that's what J.B. Phillips called the ring of truth. Here's a liberal man who set out to do a new translation of the New Testament, and in his studies became thoroughly reconverted to God. He said as he read the Scriptures, the thing that struck him is that it had a ring of truth about it. There's that simple, ordinary, it's not like, wow, who would have ever thought of that? It's, wow, that is what, I always thought it would be something like that. See that? That's the way God teaches. When you hear something, you go, shoot, that sounds weird. I've never heard anything like that. It's probably not God. But if you hear something and goes, oh, shoot, of course. That's that. Deep calls to deep. And the images of Scripture, whatever they are like that. Simple and yet profound. They have all this depth in them. That's what the parable of the soils is like. Each one of those little dumb images are just loaded with stuff. All right, are we ready? We're going to do this as scary fairy stories. The first one is called The Birds. I used to live in Sebastopol, California, for a while. And Sebastopol is just a little way away from Bodega Bay. And Bodega Bay is where Alfred Hitchcock shot The Birds, which was his horror story. Let me give it to you here. We need a new sheet of paper for this. So have you all had coffee and everything you need to be prepared for this? Here's the story. I'm going to give you, providing the coffee machines are not spilling toner and doing demonic things, I'm going to give you copies of this laid out in some linear fashion so that it'll be easier to organize. And we can even download it into your systems. So, and I will just PDA it out. And everybody will. Here's the story. And a sower went out to sow. This is not sewing machine and stuff. This is the old okay? And some of the seed that he sowed fell on what is called wayside ground. This is called wayside. What is wayside ground? Well, it's ground that's by the wayside. The side of the way. When I went to high school, I loved tennis. It's been my sport for a long, long time. our school had 4 tennis courts and 1,000 kids. About a quarter of them played tennis. So at break, there was a huge rush out of the classroom. So you can get a tennis court for the 30 minutes or something there. Otherwise, you spend the rest of your break hitting balls against the wall or something. And we had classroom I was in, the courts were here. Oh, I better not do this. So we go back to the non-scary thing. The courts were here. Our classroom was here. And this was brand new grass with a big sign, keep off the grass. Everybody would watch their watches, and people were polite in New Zealand. When the bell rang, you were free to go. But what we did is we got seats as close as we could to the door of the classroom. When the bell rang, there was this huge stream running from all different classrooms. Now, the approved way of getting to the tennis courts is to go like this. Then you spent that whole recreation time hitting balls against the wall. So what we did is, what happens when 4,000 Adidas thump over new grass? Wayside ground is what it is called. Wayside ground is ground that is hard, it's been trampled down, it's been pushed down, it's been walked on, and it is so hard on the top that if seed falls in it, it just bounces. And it just lies there. So here's the story. Seed falls, lands, and now comes the scary part. Finally, we have this. Munch, thanks for lunch. Isn't that a scary story? And then, after he's done this, he flies. Why? That's it. That's the end. Rest in peace, it's gone. Finished. Isn't that a scary story? Now, what in effect does that mean? Look, the good thing about this parable is that the disciples, who are used to being profound, there's always this look you have when you think you understand something, but you really don't. I'm very good at that look. Here we go. Oh, you get it? You go. It's not quite saying yes, but it's like an academic look. Good look. I'm very good at that look. The disciples all had this look. And then here's what Jesus says. Let's read the story. Read it in Mark first because it's a short one. Went out to sow, and as he came to pass, he sowed. Some fell by the wayside, and the fowls of the air came and devoured it up. That's it. That's the whole thing. Whole story, one single thing. The disciples come to him, and those with the 12 asked him about this parable. And he says something strange. In the King Jimmy, and I've got the King Jimmy version, I know you have advanced versions there, various forms. The NIV positive coming to you from around the world, and other versions. And King Jimmy goes like this. Unto you it is given to know the mystery of the kingdom of God, but to them that are without, all these things are done in parables, that seeing they may see and yet not perceive, and hearing they may hear and not understand, lest at any time they should be converted and their sin should be forgiven them. Now flip over to Matthew. We'll read that same explanation from Matthew's perspective. By the way, the very fact we have these different perspectives is one of the great evidences that the stories of the Scriptures are not manufactured, but real, recorded things, each by those people who gave it. If you ever get in a situation where you are questioned by the police, you will find, though I can't share it with you, too many experiences in this, you'll find that a detective will ask you what happened. But they won't just ask you once. They'll ask you 2 or 3 times. The reason why is this. I read a book some years ago called How to Never Be Lied to Again. And this guy's made an entire career on finding out what people look like when they lie. And asking questions in a way to expose this thing. So you don't even need a lie detector. It's a cool book. So, in this thing, one of the things about a lie is that you have to stick with the story you've made up. See that? And you can't change it. Because if you change it, everybody will know that it's a lie. But in real life, when you do something, when you remember what it is, and you actually look up in different directions, depending on whether you're making it up or whether you're remembering it. So depending on whether you're looking up this way or looking up that way, can show a person who's really good at this. You go, what did you do? And you're looking, thinking, imagining something. They go, yeah, that's made up. Yeah? And then, well, when you're a little kid and dumb, and your mother asks you, did you break that? You go, no. You know, and it's obvious. You are lying, see that? But when you get sophisticated and cool, you go, it's all these little things you do. And the book deals with how to see those weird little things that show people are lying or not. Now, if something happens, complex set of actions, and everybody went, hi, it's on that. Woo. And then I ask you later, write that down. Some of you will remember bits of some stuff. Some of you will remember other bits of stuff. And then what a detective does is he'll take the stories and he'll put them together. Now, if it's true, you've got bits and pieces remembered here. Later on, other bits remembered. But when you put all the bits together, it links and matches. In a lie, it's exactly the same. Everything is exactly the same. This isn't a lie. These are people listening to the same story, each one getting something and writing it down. And so the way we really should read this is I don't know what the word is for 3 speakers. Stereo we know, quadradial we know. What is 3 speakers? Triphonic. That's the word. We need to read this in triphonic sound. So instead of just laying the things, looking at them like this, or even looking at them like this, you know, we've got passages here. These are harmony of the gospel things. Matthew, Mark, Luke. Do it like this. Take the places where they say exactly the same thing, and just do this. Do that. And then the places where it isn't the same, just leave where there's an exact duplication of idea or word, just drop out the extra one and keep in one of them. Where there's something different, just leave it in. And what you'll have is an interwoven version, which is the triphonic version of what you're reading. When you do I like that word, triphonic gospel harmony here. Each person, and sometimes tied into their own unique way of seeing Jesus, will add to the thing. And you can do this with all kinds of passages where there are more than one account. One of the things where this is very, very powerful and important is just to give you this illustration before we get into our amplification of this parable, is in the book of Acts. Do you remember when Paul gives his testimony of what happened to him? It appears that record appears 3 times in the book of Acts. See if you can find those 3 passages where the Apostle Paul is telling the scary thing that happened to him. You know, 9 is one. Acts 9 is one. That's the original first encounter in Scripture. And then he tells later on what happened to him. Somebody got the next one? 22. Okay. That's one. And there's another one. 22 and 26. Yeah. Yeah, and 26. Yep. All right. Have a look at those 3, and let's do the triphonic thing on that. Give you this because it's one of these not obvious things that is just people coming looking for me. It's one of those weird things that's just there that is so authenticating to what God is really like. He doesn't show off, he just shows up. He doesn't make a big deal of something, it's just there. And when you hit that, it's like, shoot, nobody could have figured that out. It's just there, and it's absolutely real. Now, here's the story, and I don't know what your versions say, but the actual story, here's Saul, he has a ministry called Kill Christians for God, breathing out threatenings and slaughter against, so he's not like mildly disinterested. He is actively, full-on, hating Christians. And he's got warrants for their arrest and license to kill. This is 008 Saul. As he journeys, he comes near Damascus, and suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven. This is the way it happens in the X-Files, of which we have 2 more episodes before the final season. You're in usually the desert, and it's pitch dark, and then your radio starts changing channels on its own, and then a chandelier from the Hilton Ballroom comes down over your car, which starts shaking, you pass out, and 3 days later you wake up with no consciousness of being anywhere, and a little mark in the back of your neck. And that's how it happens. Here's how God does it. He waits till midday, when the sun is in its full splendor, and then the light is so bright it knocks you off your horse. No quiet stuff, and blinds you. And then the voice speaks. And the scary thing is, the light knows your name. He doesn't go, hello, what's your name? Saul, what a lovely name. He goes, Saul, why are you picking on me? And you know there's no candid camera, there's no, you go, who are you? And then he says something that just frightens the cheese out of you. I am Jesus, not just Jesus from Mexico. I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuted. This is his story and what happens to it. Now, read the thing, put yourself in the place, see what happens at midday. A light shined from heaven, and he said, who are you, Lord? And the Lord said, I'm Jesus. It's hard for you to kick against the pricks. And he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what will you have me to do? And the Lord said to him, rise, go to the city, it shall be told you what you must do. And the man which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. And Saul rose from the earth. When his eyes were opened, he saw no man. They led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. Okay, that's the first account, Acts 9. Go to the next one in Acts 22, where he's giving his defense, and he's speaking in Hebrew to these guys who are his same roots. He's telling them what happened. As it came to pass, verse 6, I came near to Damascus about noon. Suddenly there shone from heaven a great light, and I fell to the ground. I heard a voice saying, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? I answered, who are you, Lord? He said, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting. And they that were with me saw indeed the light and were afraid, but they heard not the voice of him that spoke to me. King James says, they heard not the voice, because it is the word heard. But some of your translations translate it, they understood not. The reason why they use that phrase is because it is a possible way of translating that word heard. It is the hearing with the understanding, which is true. But I don't think it's necessary. I think the word is heard not. I'll show you why. The reason why that particular thing was chosen by some translators is because it seems to be a conflict. Go to now, that's just this little passage here. So they heard not the voice of him that spoke to me. I said, Lord, what shall I do? The Lord said, arise, go to Damascus. I could not see for the glory of the light, etc. Now go to 26. We have the same story told again. If you give your testimony of what really happened to your life, and you're not making something up, it's not some fantasy or something else, every time you tell your story, you will remember little details of things you didn't remember before. Some things you leave out, some things you put in. That's the way real life is. That's the way the Bible's written. Now watch this. Here you go. Same story. You're permitted to speak for yourself. At midday, O king, I saw on the way a light from heaven above the brightness of the sun, shining round about me and them which journeyed. And when we were all full of the earth, I heard a voice speaking to me and saying in the Hebrew tongue, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? I said, who are you, Lord? He said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But rise, stand on your feet, see that? And I have appeared to you for this purpose. He tells why Jesus appeared to him, delivering you from the people and from the heathen, to whom now I send you to open their eyes, to turn them from darkness to light, from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins. And then he talks about, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay, here is the problem. In Acts 9, in the original record, we have in verse 7 this phrase, they heard a voice, but they saw no man. Okay? In Acts 22, this phrase says, except in your advanced translations, they that were met, verse 9, saw the light and were afraid, but they heard not the voice of him that spoke to me. So what translators have done have given the weight to the word understand, the hearing with the understanding, and translated, they understood not the voice. But it is not necessary. Do your triphonic thing on this now. We'll take another sheet and just show you that. Put the verses in order. It's hard to keep fingers in very good work here. We got these things. I should take this over. You can do this if you're nervous. Near Damascus saw a light from heaven. Okay, this is 9. This is 22. What does 22 say? Damascus, we get that? Light. Great light, but light. Then 9 says, he fell, heard a voice. The voice said, Saul, Saul, why are you picking on me? 22. Saul, Saul. Voice. Okay. Voice of Saul. 9 again. Voice said, I said, who are you? And then 22 says, who are you? This is good. I am Jesus. I am Jesus. And verse 9, what do you want me to do? 22. something else. Something else that isn't in this one. See? Just before, what shall I do? Is this. Heard voice. And we're afraid. Okay. Back to 9. What do? What do? Rise, stand on your feet. Rise. Sitting. 22. Back again, picking up. 22. Arise. Go to the city. Arise, go to Damascus. And then 9, verse 7, stood speechless, hearing a voice, seeing no man. When you put it together like that, you've got two distinct, they're not the same incident. Something happens here where they hear a voice, and here, what do I get? 22, I've got no. Heard not voice, verse 9. Heard no voice. So what happens is this. The light, voice says, Saul, who are you? I'm Jesus of Nazareth. 22. They hear 22. Verse 9, they saw the light and they were afraid. Verse 9. This is the heard no voice, right? Yeah, this is not this one. One belongs to that. So what happens is this. He hears a voice. Nobody else hears a voice. But everybody sees a light. So what you got is this. Acting it out. Light. Hear that? Saul, Saul. Nobody hears this voice. Saul hears it. And it's in Hebrew. And it's speaking to him. So all these men are standing there. Saul's looking like Stevie Wonder at this point. And he's like this. Who are you? Like good. They can't hear anything. Just light. And they're scared. You would be too if something brighter than the sun was suddenly all around you. So everybody Saul just fell off his horse. And he's your mighty, fearless captain. And he's standing there like, who are you, Lord? Like this. And then a voice. This time everybody hears. Go to the city. Everybody goes to the city. Saul's blind. He has to be led. Why is it that the voice speaks just to him? But later on it speaks to everyone. Because this is Saul's conversion. God deals with him personally and individually. The second one's a general command. You will go to the city. Everybody, we will go to the city. We will not show up at some other place. We will be in the city. Isn't this cool? Don't be afraid when you see things that look like contradictions and stuff like that. Run this through first. And I think you'll find very, very often it's just an amplification of what is the real thing. Now, when we run that triphonic thing on this story, we're going to use this on what does this parable mean. So you all ready? Back to our three synoptics. Matthew 13. The disciples are looking at Jesus and they ask, what does this mean? He tells them much more detail than what's there in Mark. Mark, it looks like, there are mysteries, and I'm going to hide some of it from some of you, and who knows why. In Matthew 13, he tells you why he hides it. You put the bits together, your harmony together like this, and this is what it looks like. Why are you speaking to them in parables? Because it is given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given, for whosoever has, to him shall be given, and he shall have abundance, but whosoever has not, from him shall be taken away even that which he has. That is why I speak to them in parables, because they seeing will not see, or they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, neither do they understand, and in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which says, by hearing you shall hear, and shall not understand, and seeing you shall see, and not perceive. For this, for, when you see a for, you should ask, what is that there for? For this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. But truly, many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which you see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which you hear, and have not heard them. Now, here is a very important difference between the way God teaches us and the way most of us learn today in the Western world. God has an order in which he teaches, a way that he teaches. It is almost the exact opposite of the way we learn today. Here's the way God orders. Because he's an infinite person and we are finite, that's just the way it is. And we will never become infinite. You can never become infinite. Once you've got a beginning, that's it. He has no beginning. So he's the only one who's qualified to do this stuff. No other created being can do this. Because he's infinite, it always has to come by him revealing something. You will never be able to, from a finite perspective, see the whole thing. Okay? So here's the way God teaches. He reveals. We'll put it like this. God speaks. God's truth comes by revelation. It comes from an infinite perspective down to the finite, which means he has to show you. There's no way you can find the full reality of something by starting from a finite perspective. If we have two scientists who are trying to do cold fusion or something, and they both hate each other, we have this kind of situation. Here's scientist A, and he's got an idea to do something, and so an Einstein thing. He comes over to this associate that he's working with, who's working along a different field, and he goes, I've discovered this, and this is, I think, the secret to this thing. And this guy doesn't like that, so this is him. Stood too close to the accelerator. He goes and does a bunch of research, and he goes, well, I found this, and you unfortunately overlooked in your studies what I found in my more advanced studies. See, and that ticks him off, so he goes and does this, and that ticks him off, so he gets this, and then he gets that. And he adds another 3 PhDs and gets this. Where's the end of it come? You ever read an old biology textbook or physics? Trouble with truth is it's linked and it keeps going. So to see the reality or the value of one thing, if I drew an ant here, I can't draw an ant. Let me draw a face. You're an ant wandering across. What is the significance of that dot? You don't know. Can't eat it. You know don't know what the significance of that dot is until you can get out here and see that dot is actually part of a structure and a form, and that represents a face. And you don't know the significance of that face until you see it in the context of this board and this room. And you don't understand the significance of that until you see this room and its context in the context of this whole area. And you don't understand the significance of that until you see the context of what this area has to this nation and to the world. See that? And it's all linked. Which means when God shows you whether something's important or not, it has to come from the top down. It can't ever come bottom up. You'll always have holes in your epistemology. You'll always have ways you can't know what that thing really is. And that's why we are so screwed up on truth today. We have a bottom-up attempt to find truth. We don't believe that there is anything bigger. Do you remember Star Wars when young Luke just had Han Solo coming behind and get Darth Vader off his butt? And he's heading towards the Death Star, and you know, like they've got he's got one shot. Put his protons appear into the heart of it. He's got one shot at it. And they're all watching back on the Rebel Alliance planet that's about to get blown into Kingdom Come, which will turn Chewbacca into flaming bits of teddy bear, C-3PO and R2-D2 into chirping watch parts, and there will be no Empire Strikes Back. No Return of the Jedi. Thank God, no Phantom Menace. Hopefully. Hear that? They look at this, they go, he switched off his targeting computer. They're free. He's got one shot at it. He turns off his targeting computer, and then there is the ghost of Obi-Wan there with him. Use the Force. Remember that thing? So he goes, and, you know, and there it is. And that thing there. See, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could have something smarter than a targeting computer that could give you access to stuff you can't possibly put together yourself? That's why. And why God reveals things to us. And He doesn't have to. That's the deal. We think, hey, I can find it out. I can find it out. I can find it out. You don't know how smart I really am. Nobody's ever that smart. You cannot find, from a finite perspective, the full reality there. But it can be shown. You can say, this is important. Right now, this is important. And this is not. You go, I think it's more important. When I was growing up, I couldn't understand why parents didn't eat ice cream all the time. We got ice cream like once a week, maybe. I thought, when I get to be old and have money, I'm going to just eat ice cream. I'm not going to eat this other, you know, potatoes and ice cream for breakfast, ice cream for lunch, ice cream for supper, and snacks will be ice cream. See that? Now I understand people who work in Baskin and Robbins who hate ice cream. You know? But it was the whole world to me at that time. You know what I mean? The thing that is important to you now may not be that important to you. That's why old people aren't as entranced many times with money and power and stuff. They've been there, done that, and got the t-shirt. What they're much more interested in, do I have friends? Will there be somebody there when I'm like 90 years old in a restaurant? So they start realizing what is really significant in life and not the things everybody says is. So truth comes by revelation. Comes like this. God speaks. It comes this way. Here is the second step. You do it. And that is really different. Because we're not used to having stuff said to us that actually has to be done. All we have to do is like write it down in the book. Or to take a record and I know. Isn't that true? Like data, yes, data. We need data. This is a school of data. I remember years ago I was talking to the accrediting society that accredits all universities in this country. And I was invited in there. I was actually smuggled into their meeting. It's ACCET, accreditation. And I was smuggled into there by some friends of mine who took over a defunct key punch school applied Christian principles to it, now one of the best key punch schools in the nation. Now they have, I think it's 2,000 people in their school and 5 different campuses in the Northwest, and they teach like solo mothers and people who don't have great prospects of doing something to not only run and maintain computers, but to use Word and Excel and some basic things. They get a good job. They'd be like an associate hotel manager, or a dental assistant, office person, or that thing. And they place 87% of the people who go through the school within the first 2 weeks. They get them a job within 2 weeks. That's unheard of. Try it with your degree. Hello. I have 3 PhDs. Oh, good. We have a great job for you at McDonald's. They placed these 87%. So they were in charge of the part of the program, you see, so they smuggled me in. And my job was to teach on educating a future generation. And I was actually smuggled in as a youth futurist. Certainly not a Christian. And not my goal was to do what they had asked me to do, talk about young people in the future, and then to tell them they're all lost and we're going to hell and need to get saved. And 3. So anyway, that was my agenda. And there is a thing that comes in academics, and you'll learn it as you go on. It goes like this. In the way we learn the exact opposite of the way God teaches. This thing tied in, we'll call this practical obedience. Another way of looking at this is practical service. Actually doing that which ministers to people. It helps you, others, and the universe. Another simple word for that is technology, the practical solution of life problems. So technology is really the practical solution, not necessarily electronics or something. The practical solution of life problems. So the divine order is this. God speaks, we do it. We do it when He tells us. We have the right to say, is this really God? Matter of fact, we're commanded to test those things. Is it really God? Okay? It's not just a leap in the dark, and it's not just an eastern flash. See that? It is. Is this really you, God? We could do a book. We could do a book. Wouldn't it be a cool book? Is that really you, God? Anyway, this thing, God speaks, we do it, and then here's the third part to it. Illumination. Which is called, He explains it. Maybe. That's divine order. God speaks, we do it, He explains it. Maybe. What if He doesn't explain it? He is not under compunction to explain everything He does to everybody. Have you ever had somebody do a job for you and he says, look, can you do something? Could you paint that wall? Okay. How do I paint? Do that. There's a paintbrush there and roller and paint. You want it this color? Mm-hmm. See, that's good. When do you want this? After you ask like 400 questions, they do it themselves. Because you like people who just do it. You give them this stuff and let them have some initiative. What? How do I hold the brush? See that? You like people who just go, oh, okay. It's better to get people doing stuff. That's how God teaches, and that's what the Christian life is like. It's not data transfer. And in this meeting, there is a sacred table. You'll often see it. A sacred table is where the ones who really count sit. This is a banquet in a very expensive San Francisco hotel. It's a tuxedo banquet, okay? There is 800 CEOs of major corporations here. We got like the vice president or thing of all kinds of places, plus any kind of school that needs accreditation through this organization. We've got Tom Cruise bartending schools. We've got Method actor schools, we've got Jewish rabbinical schools, we've got all kinds of CEOs of different schools here. And everybody's in tuxedos, and it's just before a banquet. Now this is the worst time to speak. If you're going to speak, there's only one worse time to speaking, just before a banquet, and that's just after a banquet. And then especially a turkey banquet. Because the tryptophan will put them all to sleep. It's really bad. I had just followed speaking a guy who had coached 3 Super Bowls to victory. It was $10,000 an hour. I am not $10,000 an hour. And then I had to come and speak to them about this thing, educating a future generation. Now, I like visual stuff. I haven't bought any PowerPoint because a lot of it has no point. But I do like visual things. And people are used to learning things from square boxes. So I'll sometimes just take a board and just point to it. People go, wow, yeah, there's nothing on it. So I like visual stuff. And then, but see the picture. Here am I. I'm from New Zealand. What is that country? My hometown is a name. It's spelled like this. Oh, I better put that on my wayside. Here's my hometown. Man, you really what? People say, where are you from? I say, Manuel. They just look at it and they go, Manure. What kind of town is that? My ambition in life, growing up, before I got interrupted, was to collect a string of degrees and go work for some oil or silicon company. Just climb in. You know that? Got wrecked, by God. I grew up. 7, I had my first lab. 9, 10, my family were buying me von Nostran's chemist dictionaries and stuff. I was doing microanalysis when kids were finding out what acids and bases were. My whole life was chemistry. I didn't care about anything else, about people. I did actually have a girlfriend when I was like 7. About 36. She was supposed to have a girlfriend. So there was this cool girl in primary school, and she was crunches. She has a polio cripple, but I didn't. She looked cool to me, and I went, hi. No, you have to learn the hard way to do it. Hi, would you be my girlfriend? She hauled up and beat me over the head with her crutches. Wham. So this can damage your psyche, make you dysfunctional in various forms. So, I'm now speaking to 800 CEOs, and this is the academic table where all those who have the power of life and death, there's a special table that you sit, and it's like away from the peon. You know, it's like 50 feet above contradiction. So I've got a seat to sit up there, and I'm very uncomfortable sitting up there. So I don't want to go. And I said, no, I'm not going to sit. And then the lady who's going to introduce me, her name is Ms. Somebody. I am Ms. Somebody. And this was her introduction. I wanted to get something visual that I could scribble on. And I don't like pulpits. I don't like pulpits for various reasons. My friend Tommy Tenning has given me one of these reasons. But pulpit, I don't know if you... Pulpit is like a big box that you can bury in. I don't even know how to explain it. There's nothing actually here that's like it. But it's something like this. Only covered. And it's a box in which you can become a head. Use talks. And they had one of those speaking podiums in this hotel. It was massive. It was like this, and it had one of those gooseneck mics sticking out, which guarantee that your head will stay in exactly the same place for an hour at the cost of audibility. You know? And then a huge light over the top of that. So you got to see a nose and a mouth talking if you were lucky. Yeah? So this was the podium for the speaker to speak in. Yeah? There are 800 CEOs in tuxedos waiting for lunch. And I got to talk to them about God, though they don't know it. And this is Ms. Somebody introduced me like this. And now we're going to hear a lecture from a Mr. Winkie Pratney on educating a future generation. But just as I was getting ready, they brought out the thing, and I said to some of the guys, I said, "Have you got any like big boards or anything I could scribble on?" And they said, "Yeah, we got an old blackboard here. It's really cool. It's like an antique thing. So we'll get it." And it was huge. It was like big, about as big as that screen, huge thing. And they were bringing it in. And she came over. I said, "Oh, this is so cool." Because I like blackboard, especially you can run your fingers down. And they bring it out, and she came down and she said, "From the high and holy place." And she said, "What is this?" I thought, for an educated lady, 4 PhDs, she's had a serious gap in her education. Oh, this is a blackboard. This is what she said in a voice dripping ice. "We will not have a blackboard." So here I am. I've got ripped the gooseneck mic. I've left the box. I just happen to have in my bag 2 cans of silly string. I don't know if you've seen silly string. It goes under various names now, but it's a liquid plastic under pressure. Now, people have wussy little cans here, like this. I had ones that looked like fire extinguishers. This one, you always tell because a properly pressurized canister is not actually, has no sharp edges. It's all, it's all rounded. These were rounded. They could shoot about 60 feet. And one was bright, iridescent pink, that that glowing neon pink, and the other one's that radiation green. Homer on Simpson's little green pellet, like that, green radiation green stuff. So while I'm getting the introduction, I'm behind the remote, and I'm shaking up and pre-testing my novels. And I understand, here is 800 CEOs with horn ring glasses, tuxedos. There's nothing more formal than a CEO in horn rims and tuxedo. And I got my introduction, and I stood up from behind the hideout. And I came out firing. It was like the Matrix, They thought they were being assassinated. They were screaming, "Ah!" But it is impossible to become dignified with green or pink stuff hanging off your horn. And I converted 800 CEOs into screaming children. 15 seconds of machine gun liquid plastic. And I couldn't go where they were, so I brought them where I was. And I said, "I'm singly unqualified to speak to you today. I don't have the same educational structures and backgrounds as most of you do here. I went through Oxford myself. Was on the back of a truck on a Thursday." And then I said, "But if you think education is a transfer of data from one system to another, you will be replaced in 10 years by a CD-ROM. Education, real training, is not data transfer. If a boss says to a secretary, 'Is that Jack on the phone? Tell him I'm not in,' he should not be surprised when she takes the money from the firm goes with the boyfriend to Bermuda because he had trained her that sometimes lying is all right, that integrity is not important. See that? That is what real teaching is. Not transfer of doctrine. Not the way we think things are. And Hebrew is a language that is filled with revelation and doing. God puts that one first, and then Greek. If you want to describe the donkey, you go to Greek. Our teaching is, this is what a donkey looks like. Here are the Latin names for donkey. Here are the parts of a donkey ear. Here are how they all fit together. Have a test. See if you can regurgitate for me the Latin words for donkey. Here's how God teaches. You know what a donkey is? Bring me one. And when you bought the donkey, we did something. That's how God teaches. When he teaches, he speaks to those who have a hearing heart. And if you have arrogance in your life, and your base is this way, first of all, here's how we first of all, we explain it. Then we decide if we want to do it, if there's any doing in the teaching. And lastly, we become spiritual. In the Bible, this is called the war of the sons of Greece with the sons of Zion. But God's method of teaching, real teaching, is the doing of the thing. And when Jesus is speaking here to the disciples, and they're asking him for an explanation, they just want the done. He tells them. That's why I teach in parables. You can't get crucified easily for just telling stories. But when people with a hearing heart, with an open heart, to listen to what God's saying, the story lives. The whole thing becomes more than an explanation. And in all of the stuff we do in the Christian life, this is the order God wants to reorder us. Now, years ago, I've spent a lot of time in different college and high school and ministries to kids. 40 years this year now, that's 4 decades. I have found that using apologetics and stuff, apologetics, by the way, doesn't mean, look, I'm sorry I'm a Christian, I couldn't help it. Apologetics is not argument either. Apologetics, I love the explanation, it's a bit like taking a thumb and putting it on somebody's glasses who doesn't know they have glasses. Speaking on the weekend, I like chocolate milk. I love chocolate milk. Let me revive it. I hate that awful rubbish 0.2%. Tastes like somebody took real milk and spat it into like 8 liters of water and then sold it at exorbitant rates. We have a prophetic-hearted friend called Jim who says when he fasts on chocolate milk. He says, I do this for 3 reasons. Number 1, I work when I fast, and milk and water doesn't give me enough energy, but chocolate milk does. He said, secondly, it's impossible to get proud when you tell people you're fasting on chocolate milk. Thirdly, I like doing it because when I tell people I'm fasting on chocolate milk, it brings all the religious demons out of people. Love chocolate milk, but I hate that other skim milk stuff. And I went into a movie's cafeteria in Texas to get some chocolate milk, and I'm wearing these glasses. You ask, why are you wearing these glasses? Because I can see into the spiritual world. These are blue blockers. These are blue blockers. And the way they work is your eyes are more sensitive to a lower frequency spectrum. The oranges, the reds, that's why they make traffic lights red and not blue. Because it's the most easily seen. If you want a yellow boat, then you won't get hit by accident so often. See, that spectrum is why they did the plasma screens in those colors. Orange reds in the early days. Now, blue blocker works by knocking out all the high blues as well as the ultraviolets. So, because your eyes have difficulty focusing on those high blues and certainly on ultraviolet, I can't see, it's strained for your eyes to work like that. But when the blues are knocked out, then your eyes relax and more light comes in, so everything looks brighter without the glare. Okay, that's how they work. The only problem with blue blockers is that you can forget you have them on, because you all look a little sallow to me today. You can't buy clothes wearing them, because they'll knock the blues out. So I go through Luby's and I get my box of chocolate. Beautiful chocolate. I go to sit down and pour it out, and it's that unbelievable, it's that demonic skim milk stuff. I can't believe it. It's like, what? And I didn't realize. I still have my blue blockers on. The box that has that stuff in it is a deep purple box. And my blue blockers knocked the blue out of the box and it became brown, just like real anointed chocolate. So with perfect heart, good logic, I came to the wrong conclusion for all the right reasons. It looked like chocolate milk to me. The presuppositions we have color our whole world. And the way God helps us is He sees the whole thing and can show us in a way we'll never be able to correct this way up. Your great challenge in any academic learning type situation is to not only get the data, but to connect it with the doing. And the great danger you will face in learning stuff, wherever else you learn it, is this. It is not what is given to you. It is the presuppositions and the paradigms and the worldview of the person giving it to you that is often unstated and unannounced that will really bring damage to your life if it's wrong. You understand that? It's not what you learn. It's the base out of which you learn it, which you unconsciously pick up, that will give you the damage. Simple illustration. If here I have a fish, and this is a submarine. That's either a big fish or a very small submarine. Okay. And notice that there's similarity between these. They both have tails, both have certain shapes, you can have light gathering apparati, and they both only move forwards except the demon-possessed sharks in the deep blue sea, which can move in any direction. The facts are that there is real similarity here. Now I'm going to make an assumption. I'm going to assume that similarity equals common ancestry. I want you to notice if there's similarity. My special effects department. So here is the conclusion. Because these have similarity, and the facts are they really do, then this is obviously the terminated 9 organicized, polymorphic metallized version of the original ancestor. If I change one thing, the assumption, the glasses, similarity, not common ancestry, but common design, I come to a totally different conclusion with the same facts. God does not require us to give up thinking He doesn't say be transfigured by the removal of your minds. So it's not, the problem is not with logic, nor even with facts, but with the right logic and the right facts and the wrong presupposition or pair of glasses. You can come to the wrong conclusion for all the right reasons and never see